First Things, episode number 69.
I seem to be lost.
And so you're working around the clock so you don't take time for yourself to feel like an actual human being.
I used to feel like no matter how hard I worked, I was just spinning my wheels.
Trying to be perfect, we try to have everything in place at one point in time, and you can't.
Hello, my friends. Welcome to this episode of First Things, the podcast dedicated to practical productivity based on modern research. My name is Brandon Vaughn, and it's my goal to help you apply productive solutions to your life to help you live with less stress, greater passion, and amazing results. Well, guys, and gals, it's so great to be back with you today, and I am so sorry, but yet again, we went a whole week and didn't have an episode, which is unlike me. We've nearly had 70 episodes, and I've been fairly consistent almost every single week. Well, if you've been listening to me in real time, you know that a few weeks ago I got sick, and it was sick while I was on vacation, and those two just don't mix very well with me, because when I got back, I was still getting over some sickness. I did record the podcast episode, which is the previous one, but I still had it kind of lingering, and I just didn't have a lot of energy to get going on things and kept falling behind on things. And then last week, it was just avalanched on me, and I just could not find the time to do my podcast episode, and I was so incredibly frustrated, but I rolled with it and am definitely feeling better this week, and am finally getting caught up on things and feeling a lot better. A lot of my own essential things like exercising and eating and my books have really gone astray, and I'm still working to get those back and integrated. We talked about this last time with the whole failure and learning from that, and I'm still doing that. I had a few good days where I was writing, and then it just kind of disappeared again just because of a lot of the work that I was having to do at the time. So again, I apologize for not letting you know, and those of you who do listen to me in real time, definitely apologize for that, because one of the things that I really like doing is trying to be consistent and at least put out a show every week. Sometimes I'm able to put them out on Thursdays or Fridays. At worst, it's maybe Saturday or Sunday, but usually I always try to get it out. Last week was just very tough for me. As I look at the schedule coming up, there are some major holidays for us. This is 2014 right now when I'm recording this episode. We're coming up into December, which is around in the whole Christmas time period, and I think that will be okay. I don't see any problems with this. If you get bored, then you can check out a new episode of First Things if you're off. But I imagine we'll have an episode after Christmas. We'll have an episode after the New Year celebration. I will probably record both of those episodes ahead of time. I'm planning on doing that so that I will be able to release them during those two periods of time. And because we've been behind 2 weeks, we will probably go into the new year talking about Greg McKeown's Essentialism book as we are finishing it up. Now, before we get started on that, I just wanted to mention I've had some great emails from Jackie. As always, I love talking to Jackie. Jackie, I definitely owe you a couple of emails, I think. And I heard from some new people who listen to the show. One of them is Luke. Luke is a student and wrote me about some things. And Luke, I owe you an email. We'll definitely be replying to you. And Brian also wrote me talking about some of the things we've been dealing with, giving me some recommendations for some things. Brian, thank you for contacting me as well. And I'll be writing both of you back very soon. It's been probably about a week or two since you've written me, but I will be replying to you, and thank you so much for contacting me. If you want to contact me, you can email me directly at me@brandonvaughn.com. And remember, my last name is V as in Victor, Aughn. Feel free to write me, and I love hearing from you guys, love hearing what's going on in your minds and in your lives, and questions that you have, suggestions that you have, resources that you have. Like Brian mentioned, a resource that I don't actually think I've ever heard before, and I'm going to definitely check that out. Okay, so we are in chapter 17 of Greg McKeown's book. Chapter 17 is dealing with progress, the power of small wins. So after that, we have 3 chapters left. Chapter 18 is flow, the genius of routine. Chapter 19 is focus, what's important now. And chapter 20 is be, the essentialist life. So let's talk about progress, the power of small wins. And Greg starts off this chapter by a quote from Doug Firebaugh, who says that every day do something that will inch you closer to a better tomorrow. And this is basically the theme of this entire chapter, and it's very good to remind ourselves of progress and the fact that we can get obsessed with thinking we need to make huge progress sometimes when it's actually the millimeters, the centimeters, the inches of progress that's really better, and especially is better than nothing, because so many times we can get fixated with having to make huge inroads, huge progress on things, and it can actually stall us from even beginning. And instead, what we need to do is every day do something that's moving us closer to our potential, to our resonators, to the things that we're most passionate about, the things that are our essential things. Here's what Greg talks about this in his book. He says, the way of the non-essentialist is to go big on everything, to try to do it all, have it all, fit it all in. The non-essentialist operates under the false logic that the more he strives, the more he will achieve. But the reality is, the more we reach for the stars, the harder it is to get ourselves off the ground. But the way of the essentialist is different. Instead of trying to accomplish it all, and all at once, mind you, and flaring out, the essentialist starts small and celebrates progress, even the smallest progress he celebrates. Instead of going for the big, flashy wins that don't really matter, the essentialist pursues small and simple wins in areas that are essential. So a non-essentialist starts with a big goal and gets small results, but an essentialist starts small and gets big results. The non-essentialist goes for the flashiest wins, but an essentialist celebrates small acts of progress. We've got to have a paradigm shift as we integrate essentialism in our lives, and we've got to start looking for the small wins. We've got to start breaking things down into smaller segments that we can achieve, that we can actually see the progress in, and look again at life as a journey and not a destination. We've said this so many times in various episodes, but we've got to quit looking at life as a destination, look at it as a journey. So for instance, I've been trying to write books, and it's very easy, very tempting to get obsessed with the destination of a finished product, a book that is published and put out and things like that. And I've got to focus more on the journey. So what's important, like right now, is that I get back into the flow again, because I've gone 2 weeks or so of breaking the incredible flow that I had going with writing. Now the challenge is to get back into that flow. That's where I'm at. This is the main thing I'm wanting to really get back into place. Now, if I'm so destination minded, I'm obsessed with finishing a book, and I can become panic because now I've lost 2 weeks on this, and it's maybe a sign that I won't finish, all this kind of stuff. All these fears can start propping back up. But guess what? That's not where I'm at on this journey. I'm not near being finished with any kind of book, but that's none of my business. That's where I'm heading, but it's really none of my business yet. My business is I've gotten derailed and I need to get back moving again. And once I get moving, it's a matter of being consistent and doing little things every single day to move me closer to those goals. That's the purpose. And it's finding these small wins that I can visibly see that's going to help me achieve this very thing. And so many times we think that if you want to do something major in your life, something big, you want to write a book, you want to change jobs, you want to move somewhere, you want to get a different house, you want to get a degree, you want to whatever. If we want to do something big, sometimes we get into this weird thinking that we have to start big. I always remember when I was going through school, and maybe this is remnant of my elementary school days, but I always used to think I had to go out and get all these great notebooks and pens and pencils, and I had to start out so big because I was doing something that was big. But if you really think about this, a lot of that type of stuff doesn't usually pan out. In fact, I've known, and probably you've known, many businesses that started out all big and hyped up, and they're non-existent today. They really don't amount to anything today. The things that are usually really big today are the ones that started small, were okay being small, and gradually made millimeters of progress toward their goals. And they were highly focused toward their goals, so they really weren't even making millimeters of progress. They were making miles of progress very quickly because they were so focused on particular things, but they were journey-minded and not destination-minded. Now, Greg quotes some research from Harvard Business Review that I found fascinating, and here's what he says in his book. He says, research has shown that all forms of human motivation, and here's what he says in his book. He says, research has shown that of all forms of human motivation, the most effective one is progress. Now, why is that? Because a small concrete win creates momentum and affirms our faith in further success. In the 1968 Harvard Business Review article entitled, One More Time, How Do You Motivate Employees? Among the most popular Harvard Business Review articles of all time, the author, by the name of Frederick Herzberg, reveals research showing that the two primary internal motivators for people are achievement and recognition for achievement. Now, more recently, Teresa Amabile and Stephen Kramer gathered anonymous diary entries from hundreds of people and covering thousands of workdays. On the basis of these hundreds of thousands of reflection, these authors, these researchers concluded that everyday progress, even a small win, can make all the difference in how people feel and perform. Of all the things that can boost emotions, motivation, and perceptions during a workday, the single most important is making progress in meaningful work. So our goal in all of this is to create small wins. In order for us to really master essentialism, to get the essential things done, we need to start small and we need to build momentum from that. And this momentum is going to propel us to the next win and then to the next win. And we're going to have these small little victories that keep moving us forward. And eventually we may even have a very significant breakthrough. But when we arrive at that point, we're going to be marveled at how much we have covered even in these small wins. Former Stanford professor Henry Eyring has written, my experience has taught me this about how people and organizations improve. The best place is to look for small changes we can make in the things we do often. There is power in steadiness and repetition. Now, I want to play you a clip of a speech by a man by the name of Phil Zimbardo. Now, Phil Zimbardo is a former president of the American Psychological Association, and he did a very famous experiment back in 1971, a very controversial experiment back in 1971, where he took some Stanford students and randomly assigned them to be either guards or inmates in a make-believe prison. And what's interesting is that these people started exhibiting terrible behaviors, especially the guards toward the inmates. And remember, this was all kind of a pretend type of thing. But they started treating these people like actual prisoners. And the guards basically created momentum that caused these subjects to act like prisoners and guards. And he also talks and does a lot of work in now the reversal of that in what he calls the Heroic Imagination Project. And he's going to mention it at the end of this talk. But this whole talk, it's kind of negative. It's about evil, and some of it might be a little hard to follow sometimes because he is a psychologist and sometimes speaks like a psychologist would. He's not as down to earth, very academic at times. But I found it a very fascinating talk, and I want you to hear this because the essence really of what he talks about, the direction toward evil or direction toward a hero, is to face the same situation, but it's a matter of choice, where we will exert our energies toward. And basically what we're saying in this whole essentialism chapter is you need to devote your energies to small wins. So let's listen to Phil talk about this very thing, and then we're going to come back and talk about this and wrap it up for today.
Evil is the exercise of power, and that's the key. It's about power. To intentionally harm people psychologically, to hurt people physically, to destroy people mortally or ideas, and to commit crimes against humanity. If you Google evil, a word that should surely have withered by now, you come up with 136 million hits in a third of a second. A few years ago, I'm sure all of you were shocked, as I was, with the revelation of American soldiers abusing prisoners in a strange place, in a controversial war, Abu Ghraib in Iraq. And these were men and women who were putting prisoners through unbelievable humiliation. I was shocked, but I wasn't surprised, because I had seen those same visual parallels when I was the prison superintendent of the Stanford Prison Study. Immediately, the Bush administration, the military said what? What all administrations say when there's a scandal. Don't blame us. It's not the system. It's the few bad apples, the few rogue soldiers. My hypothesis is American soldiers are good, usually. Maybe it was the barrel that was bad. But how am I going to deal with that hypothesis? I became an expert witness for one of the guards, Sergeant Chip Frederick, and in that position, I had access to the dozen investigative reports. I had access to him. I could study him, have him come to my home, get to know him, do psychological analysis to see was he a good apple or a bad apple. And thirdly, I had access to all of the 1,000 pictures that these soldiers took. These pictures are of a violent or sexual nature. All of them come from the cameras of American soldiers. Because everybody has a digital camera, a cell phone camera, they took pictures of everything, more than 1,000. What I've done is I organized them into various categories, but these are by United States military police, Army reservists. They are not soldiers prepared for this mission at all. And it all happened in a single place, Tier 1A, on the night shift. Why? Tier 1A was the center for military intelligence. It was the interrogation hold. CIA was there, interrogators from Titan Corporation, all there, and they're getting no information about the insurgency. So they're going to put pressure on these soldiers, military police, to cross the line, give them permission to break the will of the enemy, to prepare them for interrogation, to soften them up, to take the gloves off. Those are the euphemisms. And this is how it was interpreted. In any event, here's former Secretary of Defense Rumsfeld. He comes down and says, I want to know who was responsible. Who are the bad apples? Well, that's a bad question. You have to reframe it and ask, what is responsible? Because what could be the who of people, but it could also be the what of the situation. And obviously, that's where I'm headed. So how do psychologists go about understanding such transformations of human character if you believe that they were good soldiers before they went down to that dungeon? There are three ways. The main way is what's called dispositional. We look at what's inside of the person, the bad apples. This is the foundation of all of social science, it's the foundation of religion, the foundation of law. Social psychologists like me come along and say, yeah, people are the actors on the stage, but you'll have to be aware of what the situation is. Who are the cast of characters? What's the costume? Is there a stage director? And so we're interested in what are the external factors around the individual, the bad barrel. And social scientists stop there, and they miss the big point that I discovered when I became an expert witness for Abu Ghraib. The power is in the system. The system creates the situation that corrupts the individuals. The system is the legal, political, economic, cultural background. And this is where the power is of the bad barrel makers. So you want to change a person, you got to change the situation. You want to change the situation, you got to know where the power is in the system. So the Lucifer effect involves understanding human character transformations with these three factors. And it's a dynamic interplay. What do the people bring into the situation? What does the situation bring out of them? And what is the system that creates and maintains that situation? So my book, The Lucifer Effect, recently published, is about how do you understand how good people turn evil, and it has a lot of detail about what I'm going to talk about today. So Dr. Z's Lucifer Effect, although it focuses on evil, really is a celebration of the human mind's infinite capacity to make any of us kind or cruel, caring or indifferent, creative or destructive, and it makes some of us villains. And the good news story that I'm going to hopefully come to at the end is it makes some of us heroes. This is a wonderful cartoon in the New Yorker, which really summarizes my whole talk. I'm neither a good cop nor a bad cop, Jerome. Like yourself, I'm a complex amalgam of positive and negative personality traits that emerge or not, depending on the circumstances. This is a study some of you think you know about, but very few people have ever read the story. You watched the movie. This is Stanley Milgram, little Jewish kid from the Bronx, and he asked the question, could the Holocaust happen here, now? People said, no, that's Nazi Germany, that's Hitler. That's 1939. He said, yeah, but suppose Hitler asked you, would you electrocute a stranger? No way, not me, I'm a good person. He said, why don't we put you in a situation and give you a chance to see what you would do? And so what he did was he tested 1,000 ordinary people, 500 New Haven, Connecticut, 500 Bridgeport. And the ad said, psychologists want to understand memory. We want to improve people's memory, because memory is a key to success, okay? We're going to give you $5, $4 for your time. And he said, we don't want college students, we want men between 20 and 50. In the latest studies, they ran women. Ordinary people, barbers, clerks, white-collar people. So you go down, And one of you is going to be a learner, one of you is going to be a teacher. The learner is a genial middle-aged guy. He gets tied up to the shock apparatus in another room. The learner could be the middle-aged, could be as young as 20. And one of you is told by the authority, the guy in the lab coat, your job as teacher is to give this guy material to learn. Gets it right, reward him. Gets it wrong, you press a button on the shock box. First button is 15 volts. He doesn't even feel it. That's the key. All evil starts with 15 volts. And then the next step is another 15 volts. The problem is, at the end of the line is 450 volts. And as you go along, the guy is screaming, I got a heart condition, I'm out of here. You're a good person, you complain. Sir, who's going to be responsible if something happens to him? Experiment says, don't worry, I will be responsible. Go, continue, teacher. And the question is, who would go all the way to 450 volts? You should notice here, when it gets up to 375, it says danger, severe shock. When it gets up to here, there's triple X, the pornography of power. So Milgram asked 40 psychiatrists, what percent of American citizens will go to the end? They said only 1%, because that's sadistic behavior, and we know, psychiatry knows, only 1% of Americans are sadistic. Okay, here's the data. They could not be more wrong. 2/3 go all the way to 450 volts. This was just one study. Milgram did more than 16 studies. And look at this. In study 16, where you see somebody like you go all the way, 90% go all the way. In study 5, if you see people rebel, 90% rebel. What about women? Study 13, no different than men. So Milgram is quantifying evil as the willingness of people to blindly obey authority, to go all the way to 450 volts. And it's like a dial on human nature. A dial in the sense that you can make almost everybody totally obedient, down to the majority, down to none. So what are the external parallels? All research is artificial. What's the validity in the real world? 912 American citizens committed suicide or were murdered by family and friends in Guyana jungle in 1978 because they were blindly obedient to this guy, their pastor, not the priest, their pastor, Reverend Jim Jones. He persuaded them to commit mass suicide. And so he's the modern Lucifer effect, a man of God who becomes the angel of death. Milgram's study is all about individual authority to control people. Most of the time, we are in institutions. So the Stanford Prison Study is a study of the power of institutions to influence individual behavior. Interestingly, Stanley Milgram and I were in the same high school class in James Monroe in the Bronx, 1954. So this study, which I did with my graduate students, especially Craig Haney, we also began with an ad. We didn't have money, so we had a cheap little ad, but we wanted college students for a study of prison life. 75 people volunteered, took personality tests, we did interviews, picked 24, most normal, most healthy, randomly assigned them to be prisoner guard. So on day one, we knew we had good apples. I'm going to put them in a bad situation. And secondly, we know there's no difference between the boys who are going to be guards, the boys who are going to be prisoners. The kids who are going to be prisoners, they said, wait at home in the dormitories, the study will begin Sunday. Here are the prisoners who are going to be dehumanized, they're going to become numbers. Here are the guards with the symbols of power and anonymity. Guards get prisoners to clean the toilet bowl out their bare hands, to do other humiliating tasks. The stress reaction was so extreme that normal kids we picked because they're healthy had breakdowns within 36 hours. The study ended after 6 days because it was out of control. 5 kids had emotional breakdowns. Does it make a difference if warriors go to battle, changing their appearance or not? Does it make a difference if they're anonymous in how they treat their victims? We know in some cultures they go to war, they don't change their appearance. In other cultures they paint themselves like Lord of the Flies. In some they wear masks. In many soldiers are anonymous in uniform. So with this anthropologist, John Watson, found 23 cultures that had 2 bits of data. Do they change their appearance? 15. Do they kill, torture, mutilate? 13. If they don't change their appearance, only 1 of 8 kills, torture, mutilate. The key is in the red zone. If they change their appearance, 12 of 13, that's 90%, kill, torture, mutilate. And that's the power of anonymity. So what are the 7 social processes that grease the slippery slope of evil? Mindlessly taking the first small step. Dehumanization of others. De-individuation of self. Diffusion of personal responsibility. Blind obedience to authority. Uncritical conformity to group norms. Passive tolerance of evil through inaction or indifference. And it happens when you're in a new or unfamiliar situation. Your habitual response patterns don't work. Your personality and morality are disengaged. Nothing is easier than to denounce the evildoer. Nothing more difficult than understanding him, Dostoevsky tells us. Understanding is not excusing. Psychology is not excusiology. So social psychological research reveals how ordinary good people can be transformed without the drugs. You don't need it. You just need the social psychological processes. Alexander Solzhenitsyn says the line between good and evil cuts through the heart of every human being. That means that line is not out there. That's a decision that you have to make. That's a personal thing. So I want to end very quickly on a positive note. Heroism as the antidote to evil. By promoting the heroic imagination, especially in our kids, in our educational system, we want kids to think, I'm a hero in waiting for the right situation to come along, and I will act heroically. My whole life is now going to focus away from evil that I've been in since I was a kid to understanding heroes. The banality of heroism is it's ordinary people who do heroic deeds. It's the counterpoint to Hannah Arendt's banality of evil. Our traditional societal heroes are wrong because they are the exception. They organize their whole life around this. That's why we know their names. And our kids' heroes are also wrong models for them because they have supernatural talents. We want our kids to realize most heroes are everyday people. And the heroic act is unusual. This is Joe Darby. He was the one that stopped those abuses you saw because when he saw those images, he turned them over to a senior investigating officer. He was a low-level private, and that stopped it. Was he a hero? No. They had to put him in hiding because people wanted to kill him and then his mother and his wife. For 3 years, they were in hiding. This is the woman who stopped the Stanford prison study. When I said it got out of control, I was a prison superintendent. I didn't notice out of control. I was totally indifferent. She came down, saw that madhouse, and said, you know what? It's terrible what you're doing to those boys. They're not prisoners, they're not guards, they're boys, and you are responsible. And I ended the study the next day. The good news is I married her the next year. I just came to my senses, obviously. So situations have the power to do the same, but the point is, it's the same situation that can inflame the hostile imagination in some of us that makes us perpetrators of evil, can inspire the heroic imagination in others. It's the same situation, and you're on one side or the other. Most people are guilty of the evil of inaction because your mother says, don't get involved, mind your own business. And you have to say, Mama, humanity is my business. So the psychology of heroism is, we're going to end in a moment, how do we encourage children in new hero courses that I'm working with Matt Langdon, he has a hero workshop, to develop this heroic imagination, this self-labeling, I am a hero in waiting, and teach them skills. To be a hero, you have to learn to be a deviant because you're always going against the conformity of the group. Heroes are ordinary people whose social action is extraordinary, who act. The key to heroes is two things. You have to act when other people are passive. B, you have to act sociocentrically, not egocentrically. And I want to end with a story that some of you know about Wesley Autry, New York subway hero, 50-year-old African-American construction worker. He's standing on a subway in New York. A white guy falls on the tracks. The subway train is coming. There are 75 people there. You know what? They freeze. He's got a reason not to get involved. He's black, the guy's white, and he's got 2 little kids. Instead, he gives his kids to a stranger, jumps on the tracks, puts the guy between the tracks, lays on him. The subway goes over him. Wesley and the guy, 20.5 inches height. The train clearance is 21 inches. A half an inch would have taken his head off. And he said, I did what anyone could do. No big deal to jump on the tracks. And the moral imperative is, I did what everyone should do. And so one day, you will be in a new situation. Take path 1, you're going to be a perpetrator of evil. Evil meaning you're going to be Arthur Anderson. You're going to cheat, or you're going to allow bullying. Path 2, you become guilty of the evil of passive inaction. Path 3, you become a hero. The point is, are we ready to take the path to celebrating ordinary heroes, waiting for the right situation to come along to put heroic imagination into action? Because it may only happen once in your life. When you pass it by, you'll always know, I could have been a hero, and I let it pass me by. So the point is thinking it and then doing it. So I want to thank you. Let's oppose the power of evil systems at home and abroad, and let's focus on the positive. Advocate for respect of personal dignity, for justice and peace, which sadly our administration has not been doing. Thanks so much.
So I hope you found that fascinating. The basic idea, again, is that we can use our energies to set up a system, to set up a way of life, of looking at life, that makes execution of goodness easy, that can make execution of essentialism easy. Or we can resign ourselves to a system that makes it harder to do good, that makes it harder to do the essential things in our life. we have to be proactive. We have to look for the small wins in our life. So how do we do this? Well, we can focus on minimal visible progress. There's an old saying that says, done is better than perfect. And I have to remind myself of that many times. To be done with something is so much better than trying to be perfect, because when I'm trying to be perfect about this, I find that I don't ever finish. I don't ever let it go. I will just keep it going and going and going. And at some point, I've just got to say it's done. Let it go. So you should ask yourself, what is the smallest amount of progress that would be useful? What is the smallest amount of progress that is valuable to that essential task that you are trying to get done? I mean, really think about this. So if you want to change jobs, to change your career, if you want to move somewhere, if you want to write a book, if you want to start your own business, okay, all of those are great, lofty goals. But what's the smallest amount of progress that would be useful to that essential task? What's the smallest thing you could do that would make a difference? Well, I mean, like for my writing, it's very easy. I could sit down today and write for 30 minutes. Now, that seems pretty small, because what can 30 minutes do? It's just 30 minutes. I thought, it would probably take a year writing 8 hours a day to write a book. Well, maybe it will. And you say, 30 minutes, that's nothing. Well, it's nothing, but if you do it every single day, it's amazing how much you get done. And I, again, can testify to that. I did this for, 6 or 7 weeks in a row and wrote like 10 chapters in a book, doing 30 minutes a day, doing nothing more than that, and just willing to go with the smallest amount of progress. So if you want to be an entrepreneur, you want to start your own business, what's the smallest amount of progress that you can do? Maybe you could buy a course, and every day for 30 minutes, you go through it and you take down notes. You read a book of some successful person with this, and you start learning and trying to figure out how you would apply that to your life. You want to get a college degree. Well, why don't you go and fill out the paperwork to get into the school? That's a small amount of progress. You haven't earned your degree. It's going to take you, 2, 3, 4, 5 years to go through this program. But have you even signed an application to be admitted into the school yet? I mean, you see what I mean? There's all of this small amount of progress that, again, we can get so fixated on the end result that it prevents us from even starting today. And we need to ask ourselves, what can I do today? What is something incredibly small that many people would consider it insignificant, but it is at least moving me, maybe in a small increment, but it's moving me in the direction I want to go? Perhaps even we should take a note from artists, and instead of thinking of our lives as a script, all worked out in detail, maybe we need to look at our life as storyboards. I don't know if you've ever seen how some of these people do this with cartoons and other things, where they will put out storyboards, which will be pictures of scenes in the movie or the animation, and they will use that sometimes instead of writing a script or before they write a script, because they're trying to get a visual for things. And so we need to maybe do that, to sit down and visualize that you are an entrepreneur owning your own business. Sit down and visualize that you have that degree, and then start working it backwards to figure out some small steps that you can do today that will push you in that direction. Another thing that Greg mentions is to do the minimal viable preparation. And here's what he says about this. You can start early and small, or start late and big. Late and big means doing it all at the last minute, pulling an all-nighter, making it happen, or studying all night for that test the next day. Early and small means starting at the earliest possible moment with the minimal possible time investment. Often just 10 minutes invested in a project or assignment 2 weeks before it is due can save you much frantic and stressed out scrambling at the last minute. Take a goal or deadline you have coming up and ask yourself, what is the minimal amount I could do right now to prepare? So I think with that, we will stop for today. Again, thank you all for listening to me rant about many of these topics that I know are helping you. They've been helping me as well. I, again, deeply apologize because of my hectic life and getting sick. And I mean, I guess I shouldn't apologize for getting sick, but you know what I mean, hopefully, especially if you guys are listening to me in real time. I really appreciate that. I really appreciate you giving me of your time to listen to me. And thank you for that. I honestly thank you for doing that. And I always feel bad if we have to miss a week and I don't get a chance to let you know. Some of you wonder what happened and different things like that. And so I deeply do apologize for that. And thank you so much for sticking with me today, listening to us talk about more on essentialism. And we're almost done with this study. And then we are going to begin something new. And I'm looking forward to having a few days off during the Christmas season so that I can sit and rethink, to go through your survey results. I still haven't forgotten your surveys that you've done for me, and to really kind of think out this new year. What topics do we want to cover? Where do we want to go into? I'm honestly thinking that I've always kind of shied away from one particular book that I've always found to be beneficial because it's kind of, I don't know, it's almost a little manipulative type of book. Old book by Manuel Smith, When I Say No, I Feel Guilty. And I've kind of quoted and paraphrased from it a long time, but he's basically talking about how to say no. And one of the things I've heard so much from people is when we did that whole study over assertiveness. Wow, did I hear from a lot of people. I think I've heard more from people on that assertiveness episodes than I ever did. So I'm kind of thinking, wow, maybe we should really dive more into learning to say no and how to deal with that. So we may do that sometime in the next year. We're going to talk about possibly how we learn and how to better learn things. And those of you who are in school will benefit from that, but also those of you who are on jobs and you need to learn new things, to stay fresh, to stay current, to be continually marketable in your environment. We definitely want to talk about that. So we're going to really think through some things, and it will be fun. We are over a year in this podcast, and we're just getting started on a lot of amazing things that we can talk about and deal with on this show. So as always, if you guys have any questions for me, if you have any comments for me, feel free to email me at brandonvaughn.com. You can reach me by Twitter and Facebook. Just go to my website, firstthingsproductivity.com/69. As in episode 69, you can leave me comments there. You can also see links to Facebook and Twitter and all that good stuff there. So we will pick this up next week and start dealing with the last couple chapters in the Essentialism book. So until next time, remember this: every day, do something that will move you closer to a better tomorrow. Every day, do something that maybe seems so insignificant and small, but it is something that is moving you closer to your dreams, to your resonators, to your essential things. Every single day, don't go to sleep until you do something that is so easy to do that it would be foolish not to at least do it, and it's going to move you closer to your goals. So as always, embrace today with passion and intention, and don't die with your music still inside you.